Hey folks, let's try that again. We had a sound problem there. So it's Irene. I'm back again and here to do a live stream, obviously on YouTube, all on awesome. You can hear me. Thanks. Technology. I'm going to do a live stream today on the topic of what life with a regulated nervous system looks like. And while I could speak to this topic for probably hours and hours and hours, and I have over the years, I'm going to do a short introduction to what this looks like. And then I'm going to get to the questions. So I've got questions that have been submitted. So here's how this is going to go. I'm going to ramble for maybe about 15 or so minutes. And then I'm going to get into the Q&As, the questions, answer your questions. We do have the chat open. And so my team is here with me. You can't see them, but they're in the back end, and they're going to grab those questions and bring them to my attention. But my husband and colleague, Seth, is also going to be here. When he pops a question in, an answer, I should say, you'll see my name. So that's him on the back end typing. I haven't cloned myself, not yet. So he is in there answering quick questions. So what we'll make sure is that there's not a repeat. He'll try to get to questions in the chat that are simple, and then I will answer questions that are a little more longer in form and require a little more detail. So I'll also, before we get into the lecture component, we have got we're calling it a super sale right now, a little cheesy, but that's what we're calling it because it's the biggest discount we've ever offered on my starter course, the 21-day nervous system tune-up, which is regular priced at $297, and today it is $150 off. That's $147 US. Quick note about this course, because some of you might have questions. It is self-study, but there is support. So the way it works, when you join, you get access to a website with all of the lessons. There are 21 of them over 21 days. And we drip feed you an email every day to prompt you to keep you going through this course. Now, because everyone is different, and I'll speak about this when I get to questions, you still go at your own pace. So some people have said that it's taken them 6 months to do this 21 days. Some people get through it in 30 days. Some people take a year to do it. Some of my senior students who have gone through my larger programs and curriculum, namely SmartBody SmartMind, have gone back to the 21-day course and curriculum as a review. So I want you to think of this course not so much as something that you have to get done in 21 days, but as a curriculum, as that good book that you go back to, that good cookbook that you might go back to, or to refer to recipes to get things out of, mix and match. So it is a very different kind of learning, very different than what you might have had when you were in, say, elementary school or high school or university. There is no final test. If you have to miss a day, or you miss a week, or you repeat the first lesson over and over and over again, we encourage that. But I wanted to say those pieces to lead into the next piece, which is you do get support. So on our forums, it is text-based, meaning you type questions into our forums on our private website. And then my moderation team, who are all trained in somatic experiencing, 2 of them are also trained in the Feldenkrais method and in working at the level of early trauma. So you have professionals, my handpicked professionals there, answering your questions most days of the week for the 21 days. So I wanted to start with that. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. Out of curiosity, where is everybody from today? If you are wanting to share where you are in the world, I'd love to see that, just so I can see who's tuning in and from where. If you are brand new to me, of course, my name is Irene Lyon. And I, in some ways, invented, oddly, this online world of nervous system healing through online courses and programs. I originally put this work online in 2012, which was a while ago, and we're still going. We're still working with these curriculums. They have stood the test of time. We have studied at academic level my longer program, SmartBody SmartMind, with positive results. So we're doing a lot to help foster this education and this practice and really this changing of how we work with ourselves and connect to the environment. So I just wanted to mention that there's been longevity with this curriculum, and there's a reason why our senior students are always coming back and they're telling people about this work. So again, for today, we still have a sale on. Now is the time to get in. Final housekeeping. If you have a question that I do not answer, we do have an FAQ section on the page. So we can post the page here in the chat and you can look at that while I talk. There are 10 commonly asked questions on that FAQ section. And let's just say you still have a question, you can always email us. So we'll pop the email into the chat. It's just support@irenelyon.com. So I'm going to have a sip of water and then we will get going. And see, we have people from Poland, LA, Washington, just down in Olympia. Hello. Canmore, Alberta, beautiful spot. Abbotsford, that's my neck of the woods, roughly in the lower mainland of Vancouver. Upstate New York, it's a beautiful area. California, San Juan Capistrano, is that right? Ottawa, Bulgaria, the Netherlands. All right. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to speak about the nervous system as if you haven't ever heard about it, and I'm going to try to keep it simple but still have some complexity in it. So this is going to be a quick version of how our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, creates health in the body and what that looks like. So typically people talk about trauma, healing trauma, PTSD, chronic illness, fibromyalgia, autoimmune, mental disorders, addiction, all these things. There's so many things that we connect with dysregulation of the nervous system. But today I'm going to talk about what things look like when that nervous system gets better, when it gets healed. So to talk about that, I need to talk about the connections of the nervous system and this entire body of ours. And I know I can't see you all. So maybe you're sitting on a chair, maybe you're in your car, maybe you're taking a walk, maybe you're lying down, maybe you're outside. Wherever you are right now, as you listen to this, one thing I might ask is, what would it be like to just sense and connect to the surface you're resting on or standing on or lying on? Now, this is just a very simple practice in connecting to the world around you and noticing the pressure. Okay, now I'm going to give you a few more little practices to move through. Very simple. This is not all that I teach. It's some of the basics. And the reason I want to bring this to light is I will be speaking about a lot. Lots of questions will come up that might involve traumatic story and the system being not well. So if there's a question coming in from someone who wants to have an answer on chronic illness, I'll talk about that. So of course, I don't know where any of you are in terms of your health right now, but I just want to make sure that as I go through this theory, that you are staying connected to yourself in the best ability possible, grounded, and even connected to the environment. So of course, you might be looking at the screen here, but if you need to take your eyes off of the screen, and I do that often because it's hard to have your eyes on the screen for a long period of time, I do that. I look around. I look at the comments, I look at my papers, etc. So take care of yourself as I go through this theory, because it can bubble up some stuff, right? It can bubble up some stuff. So I like to teach with my hands, and I might even get you to move your hands and touch parts of your body just to connect with where your nervous system is. So nervous system 101, we have got this nervous system that has many branches. And there's actually two main types of nervous system, if we use it that way: central and peripheral. So central is your brain and your spinal cord. So if you even take your hands, touch your head, your brain's in there. I can guarantee you your brain is in there, and your spinal cord is going through your body, protected by your spinal bones, your vertebra. So that's the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. Then you've got all these nerves that come out of the brain and come out of the spinal cord. That's called the peripheral nervous system. And maybe even while I speak this, Seth, if you want to just put some of these keywords in the chat so people can see how they're written: central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. Now, what I work with is the peripheral nervous system. It's hard to get into the brain. It's hard to get into the spinal cord, right? Out of this brain, though, are cranial nerves. Out of the spinal cord are the nerves that allow us to move our hands. If I were to say, clap your hands or get up and do a dance, it is the peripheral nervous system that is allowing you to do that. Of course, as well as things in the brain that need to balance us, make sense of where we are in space, etc. The other thing that these peripheral nerves are connected to, I'm going to point to my insides, are organs, right? Our glands, so our lungs, our heart, our digestive system, stomach, gallbladder, liver, the rectum, the reproductive organs, so many, pancreas. This peripheral nervous system is also going to influence the blood vessels. We would call that the vasculature, blood pressure, heart rate, temperature regulation, hormonal distribution, all of the glands, thyroid, all the pieces in our brain. Everything in our body is governed by this peripheral nervous system via the autonomic nervous system. So again, I mentioned these peripheral nerves that come out of the brain and spinal cord. We then have the nerves that make us move. And then we also have the nerves that govern this physiology in our body. This is the autonomic nervous system that goes to the viscera. I'm going to short it for all these organs. I'm just going to say viscera. The next thing you need to know is this autonomic nervous system also governs our survival responses. So this is where the fancy words of sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system come in. If I go one step further, this is where the vagus nerve comes in. The vagus nerve comes out of the brain. It is responsible for the parasympathetic nervous system. I'm not going to get into all the branches because I've done many videos on the polyvagal theory and how that works. But the quick notes now, your vagus nerve is important, but it's not the only nerve that is important. But it does go to the heart, it does go to the lungs, and it goes all to the guts in here. I'm sure some of you here put up your hand or say, yep, that's me, have had gut problems, maybe autoimmune problems, maybe heart palpitation problems, trouble breathing, trouble connecting. This vagus nerve governs our ability to not only process and rest and digest, but it also does connection, and it also puts us into shutdown. So if I go back a little bit, these survival responses: fight, flight, freeze, and then we have collapse or shutdown. And these are states of survival physiology. They are states of survival physiology: fight, flight, freeze, and then what we call shutdown, collapse. Fawn is in there, but the fawn response is a little more sophisticated. So I like to keep it to the bare survival pieces. Now, the reason this is important, coming to the end of this anatomy lecture, if our body is caught in a constant state of survival, whether real threat, I'm in a war zone, I'm in a natural disaster zone, that's not good, but we need it. We need our survival responses when there's actual threat coming at us so we can protect, we can defend, or we can shut down, or we can freeze. We numb out the pain. We need this. Humans need this. Animals in the wild need this. Now, humans are a little different because we have a weird tendency of keeping ourselves, anybody do this, in bad situations that we know are not good for us. Usually, and I'm generalizing here, because maybe our upbringing wasn't the best and we haven't rewired this peripheral autonomic nervous system to seek out goodness, to seek out pleasure, to seek out joy, good options for food and taking care of ourselves. So if we stay stuck in these survival responses from, say, an early childhood that wasn't great, there's so many reasons why we get stuck in survival. It's not just abuse. It can be surgical. It can be the world. It can be many, many things. If we stay in that, our autonomic nervous system physiology, this survival stress physiology, this peripheral nervous system is constantly under stress, under duress. And when that occurs, so you're going to have to link these things together. When we're under stress, under survival physiology, we're constantly shutting ourselves down, or we're frozen, or we're hypervigilant to the world around us. We're disconnecting, we're dissociating. The nervous system is co-opted for survival. It's co-opted into survival, and its job is survival, which means this autonomic nervous system, these peripheral nerves that go to our viscera, that go to connection, that go to thinking brain and cognition, they're kind of like put on the back burner. They're just kind of waiting. They want to do well. They want to heal. They want to process food. They want to connect. They want to create. But what's happening is that survival is number one. The system wants to survive. So if there is a quote unquote metaphorical fire going on in your body, or there's an attack going on in your body, the system's like, we got to deal with this thing. It's almost like an immune response. We got to deal with this thing. We can't worry about digestion. We can't worry about pumping toxins out of the body. We can't worry about making a baby. We can't worry about going for a walk and enjoying ourselves. So that is, in essence, the macro of how our autonomic nervous system gets hijacked because it's worried about survival, because its job is survival, but its job is also keeping us healthy. So that is how that works. Now, what does life look like with regulation? Because many of you might be here because you don't have that. Again, the list of things: gut problems, skin problems, autoimmune, mental, what we call disorders. I don't like that term, but that's how we classify them. We classify them as mental stress, right? Mental illness. Things like anxiety, depression, bipolar. For example, we have seen they are connected to early adversity and stress. And we know this through the research, through the ACE study, and it's just becoming shown over and over again that these mental disturbances, these cognitive processing abilities, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, are connected to the system just being in survival, and the regular system can't tick over and work well. Now, I want to do something fun here. This is a surprise. So what I'm going to do, I've got this very big stack of Post-it notes. Now, they all have writing on them. And I thought what would be a good way to give you an idea of some key things that occur when we have a regulated nervous system is share with you what some of my students have written down. So, little side story, I'm in the midst of training practitioners right now through my Sci-Intuitive mentorship process. And one of the assignments we did in person last year was they were given Post-it notes and markers, and they had to sit and write down all the things that they could think of have changed in their physiology, in their body, since doing this nervous system work online with me through my courses. And they're so good. So I'm just going to read some of them. So, my family is less triggering. Seeing my parents as people. No more chronic pain. Motivation to work out. This is reference to self-harm. I used to cut and self-harm. Now I've downgraded to skin picking, but it's pretty much gone, except in really intense stress. So some of you might be going, what the heck does cutting and skin picking have to do with this? Well, these habits, our behavior is driven by survival physiology. Things like OCD, things like needing to control, having strict routines, bullying people, these sorts of things, these behaviors that we act out, that we do, inherently are related to our stored survival physiology. So when we improve our regulation, we stop harming ourselves. And so that's why that one comes in. Less reactive to loud noises. And I pause before reacting. I'll speak to this quickly. I have some students who are no longer sensitive to not only loud noises, but bright light. A lot of people who have high sensitivity, it's due to dysregulation of the nervous system. So when they get regulated, pain doesn't overtake their body when they're in stressful situations, right? Again, these pain responses are related to those peripheral nerves that I mentioned a moment ago. Even things like peripheral neuropathy, I have seen can be healed when we get regulated within our nervous system. And I'll throw into that conditions like MS, ALS, for example. While the nervous system healing isn't the only thing, we know diet plays a huge part. We have also seen, and Gabor Mate has talked about this and written about this in his books, all the time, especially in his book, When the Body Says No, there is a strong connection between these neurodegenerative diseases and dysregulation of the nervous system, especially around us people pleasing and disconnecting from ourselves to help others over and over and over again. Temperature regulation. I am less cold. Again, I mentioned temperature regulation. So when we have got good nervous system health on board, our body knows how to react to the outside temperature. If it's hot out, we sweat. If it's cool, we seek out warmth. Or our blood knows how to perfuse the system so that heat comes to the body. Asthma, gone. So asthma, we sometimes think is just this genetic condition. It is actually highly related to stress. The airways, they're called the trachea, the windpipe, the bronchioles. Those are the pipes that go into the lungs. When we're under intense stress, they can constrict. And that can happen out of nowhere, but it can happen due to stored survival stress. I love this one, solid poops. So bowel movements are important, and we want our bowel movements to be healthy. We don't want to be constipated. We don't want to have diarrhea. We don't want to have IBS. I think someone mentioned IBS a little while ago. Again, this gut is our first brain. And so when we are oversensitized or put under threat when we're young, this gut system and the nerves that feed the gut, remember again, this is the autonomic nervous system that is going to the gut, specifically the vagus nerve. It's part of the parasympathetic nervous system. When we've got regulation on board, we begin to process our food better. The stomach acid works better. The digestion of nutrients in the small intestine works better. The absorption, I should say. And then the creation of bowel movements and our feces, if I'm really descript, it becomes better. And so solid poops for the win. Better and healthier food choices. So important. The reason why this is important, I know who here struggles with eating well, who here struggles with wanting to go to junk food, who here overeats, who here undereats, not enough hydration. All of this, again, is connected to these signals inside what's called our interoception. I'm going to use a fancy word there. And again, Seth can write interoception. That is the perception of our internal environment. When we're stuck, again, I'm going to use this hand in that survival response. When we're putting out the proverbial fires because there's threat coming at us, or we have perceived threat because of old stuff that's stuck in our system, we're not going to be able to listen to our insides, because either they're overreacting or they're shut down. And so we can't make good choices. This isn't just with food. This is with people. This is with where we live. This is with the environment that we choose to be in. All sorts of things. Here's a good one and a fun one. More able to enjoy sex. If I take this purely biological, we're meant to make babies and procreate. If that wasn't the goal of the biology, we would not be here as a species. And so this desire, this primal desire to seek out a partner, to have connection, to create babies. Now, I'm not saying that everybody must do that, but many people want to do that. And some people can't because it's difficult to connect. It's difficult to have accurate perception of who they should mate with if we take it really simple. And so I love that one. Like I said, there's many. I'll do a few more and then we'll get into the questions. Can be with discomfort easier. Can be with discomfort easier. So this is the thing. Getting regulated in our nervous system doesn't mean everything is perfect. It doesn't mean we don't have stress. It doesn't mean we're not going to experience a trauma. But what it does mean is that we're not hyper driven already in survival stress. So when an actual threat comes to us, or when we're processing an old threat or trauma that's stuck somewhere in our system, we can be with the discomfort. And this is a great time for me to talk about what occurs when we start to regulate our nervous system. There isn't just this, like, one day we're dysregulated and then the next day we're regulated. I wish it were that easy, right? It's not like switching a light on. It's like building a house, right? If you've ever built a house from the ground up, you don't even start with foundation. You first have to start with surveying and blueprints and can we even build here, right? So when you embark on this journey of learning how to, we call it grow capacity and build foundation, it still starts with this education that you're getting. It's so important to understand why you're doing this work. And so when you get that on board, when you feel something uncomfortable come up, and granted, it is not a real emergency, right? If your bone is broken, go to the hospital. But if you're getting this odd, sensation in the arm or somewhere in the body, when you know, oh, this is that old injury coming up, or this is that tightness in my chest from me always clamping down my words because it wasn't safe to speak when I was a kid. We have tissue around all of the organs, specifically fascia, or fascia, as some people say. We can type that into the chat so people know what I'm talking about. But fascia can also store stress. It can store shock. We're starting to realize there's a matrix and there's fluid with this fascia. And so if we are holding in our breath, not letting ourselves speak, we have an injury to somewhere in the body. Part of coming undone from these survival reactions and traumas is the system has to kind of go through a bit of a roller coaster out of the stored stress. So we might feel fight responses. We might feel flight responses. We might sense what's called a freeze response come over us. And we might go, whoa, I'm feeling a little dopey today, but that doesn't make sense. And then I think, oh, I'm working on this thing that put me into a freeze or put me into a collapse 50 years ago. And so back to, I can be with discomfort more easier. Not only do we know intellectually, this is not weird, this is normal, we then have the tools. And again, these are the practices I teach to be with that discomfort and let it move through in the way it should. More authenticity. More authenticity. So that's a word that's kind of been thrown around a little bit, but I would say that authentic self is what we want. If we did not have unconditional love growing up, if we did not have secure attachment, and if our family system wasn't in good regulation, we're probably not going to have had a good start with being who we authentically are. I believe in a soul. I believe that we have purpose and we're meant to do certain things here on planet Earth. And when we have this survival physiology running our show, when it's driving the front of our bus, all those important pieces don't get to flourish because we're, again, constantly putting out these proverbial fires in our system. We're in lockdown mode. We can't move. Literally, for some of us, we can't move. Okay, final one, and then I'll get into the questions. These are super fun. Maybe I'll keep going through these in different calls. Let me know if that would be an interest to all of you. And thanks to my SPT students for being so good at noticing all these things that have changed in their body. The one thing that was interesting when these students put all these Post-it notes or wrote them out, we put them up on a wall, and then everybody walked around looking at them kind of like we were at a museum. And a lot of people were like, oh my goodness, when they read other people's, they're like, oh, you're right. I used to have bowel problems, or I used to have, I remember someone said, I used to have skin rashes all the time, and I just realized I don't get them anymore. So that, again, what is life with the regulated nervous system? It is having our body recover and repair. It is in good immune enhancing ability, because again, these peripheral nerves are taking care of waste products. They're repairing cells. The other thing that occurs when we're more regulated is we want to move more. We don't want to stay under the covers, slumped on our couch. We want to get out. We want fresh air. We want sunlight. And we know all these things are essential to health. And so what occurs is we get more vibrancy and more health in our nervous system. In other words, we're taking out these survival stresses. The byproduct is healthier lifestyle behaviors. And then that contributes to the whole health. I'm going to end on this one. No more FOMO. No more fear of missing out. This comes back to authenticity and knowing what we like, knowing who we want to be with and what we want to do. And if we're living in that world that's kind of very high school-ish, where we're trying to impress, we're being in these little cliques, we're doing all these things that are very much what kids and teenagers do. We're being driven by trying to stay in a social group. And we need social connection. We need to be with others. But sometimes we go into this FOMO because we don't want to be alone. And I get that. But then we choose bad situations. We choose bad partnerships. We choose bad careers. And so if I flip that, another part of healing our nervous system and having regulation in our nervous system is we really do choose the right people, the right job. We know when to leave toxic people. We know when to leave that bad job. Or maybe even I've worked with some people that they can't leave their job because they need to make a living. They need to feed their kids. And so they find a different way to be with that situation. Now, I will say if a situation is abusive, toxic, threatening, I'm going to be really honest, no amount of my work and nervous system healing will shift you out of that threat response. If it is a real threat, then your system will react to that threat. So even someone with the best regulated nervous system in the world, if they're put into a war zone, either an actual one or a metaphorical one, their system is going to react. It's going to go into defense mode. It has to. Our brain has to go into defense mode when there is threat. So part of this work is also really getting ourselves into knowing what is good for me and what is not good for me, and then acting with it. And that can be tough. I'll be really, really honest. Okay, I'm going to get some of the questions that were submitted. So let me just orient to this. And I'll get going. All right, so first question here from Anne. It's related to hormones and female health. So does perimenopause affect a woman's ability to be regulated most of the time? Or does regulation look different in different stages of life? This is a great question. And I think this is quite multidimensional. So I'll just speak from my experience, but what I've seen with others. I think a lot of the reason women, let's just say in the West, struggle more so than women in, we could say, more lower socioeconomic countries, because it's true, is because of our dysregulation. I hate to say it, but it's just the way it is. If we don't have good regulation, I'm going to go back to that peripheral nervous system that connects to our hormones, our hormone release. It is going to be off. It is going to be faulty. Now, the other interesting thing, and I just mentioned this, is when we have more dysregulation, we're less likely to be active. Our metabolism is more likely to be slow. We're maybe not outside in the sun as much. And we're seeing now that hormonal health is deeply connected to circadian biology. And so, us humans, we need the sun. And there's been this demonization of the sun being bad for us. Now, of course, we don't want to go sit and burn ourselves to a crisp, but healthy exposure to the sun is essential. Two of my really good friends, I'll name them, Carrie Bennett and Sarah Kleiner, they're experts in circadian biology. Getting outside, getting the feet on the ground. This has been a big explosion in the biohacking and health world, but it is exploding for good reason. We're meant to be connected to the environment and the sun and the earth. And so what these ladies are finding is that when women get connected to the sun, to the ground, they're not in front of blue light. This is a big one. First thing in the morning and late into night, their hormones and their symptoms of perimenopause and menopause completely shift. We also have to make sure we have a healthy body weight. It's important, right? So I say all these things because when we have good regulation on board, we crave the sun, we crave movement, we will crave foods that are better for us. And then that feeds the hormonal, the endocrine system. I would say that for the most part, we have not gotten close, at least us women in the West, to what health looks like in those later years. It shouldn't be riddled with chronic pain, inner uterine area, the rising rates of endometriosis, PCOS, all these things I've seen them connected to, yes, nervous system health, but also this circadian biology. The one more thing I will say, if you think of this body of ours, I mentioned the fascia. There's also these areas of the body called the diaphragms. Now, we don't teach diaphragmatic work in 21 Day, but we do in SBSM. And these diaphragms are adopted from osteopathic traditions. They also line up, for those of you, if you're familiar with the chakra system, all these different levels. And so when we have, again, back to my example, survival stress running our show, we've got that proverbial fire burning. One of the things that can occur is these diaphragmatic layers of our body get shut down, or they're blocked, or they're tight, they're restricted, and there isn't any flow. This is the concept of chi, right? Eastern traditions, we need the chi flowing. We need, in osteopathic tradition, we need the central chain flowing so that the lymph and the fluid can all move. I have experienced, as have my clients and students, when they get this flow going through better regulation, so back to life with a regulated nervous system, these processes inside and also our reproductive health shifts, it changes. I know a big part of these menopause and menopausal symptoms are changes in temperature regulation. Again, I do believe that when we have good regulation on board, we will be able to move through that process of our life without these massive swings in temperature dysregulation, because our system is just healthier in general. So I hope that answers that question. I would say this hormonal health piece, it's the nervous system and circadian health and good food and healthy body weight. And also, of course, good relationships. It all contributes. Can you talk about how water fasting aids in the healing of the nervous system, not just a day of it, but long fasts like 100 hours? Again, this is not my complete expertise. It comes back to what your system needs. You know, there's been this thought that you just have to fast and everything heals. Now, we do know that fasting and going into ketosis puts our system in what is called autophagy. And this is where the cells clean themselves. And this is a common prescription and therapeutic when someone is, say, wanting to heal from cancer naturally or autoimmune conditions. And we've seen, and I can't name research, but again, I know my colleagues who do this and purport very healthy types of fasts that are good for a person's body, that a lot of intense illness can heal and shift. The issue that I have is that if someone is living in survival stress, a great deal of it, I should say, When we start to fast, and if we don't have good regulation, the body is going to go, uh-oh, threat, no food. We're going to shut the system down more. We're going to slow the metabolism down more, and we don't want that. To come back up to the question about perimenopause, I also know that women should not be fasting in certain parts of their cycle, specifically, I think the first 7 days. So you also have to be careful that you're not putting your system under duress when the system is in a different mode of needing to clean, purge, detoxify, because of course, menstruation is a natural detoxification process. So we don't want to add more at that time. So again, this one is a little bit out of my scope, but I do know that some people have sworn by long fasts and some have said it messed up their metabolism. From my experience and hearing people, I find it seems that men, because of their physiology and their cycle is very different. They have a 24-hour hormonal cycle. We have a 28-day cycle of hormonal shift. They tend to have a better, I would say, more luck. I don't know if that's the right word, but they tend to work through and move through fast in a more, we could say therapeutic way, but that doesn't mean that women can't as well. All right. Next question. Recently, my massage therapist, this is from Lisa, did a treatment that stimulated my parasympathetic nervous system. And for several days, I felt very calm and present, but slow, a lot slower than normal for me. It made it difficult to get things accomplished. Okay, so there's 3 paragraphs to this question. So what I hear is the moment you stimulate the entire parasympathetic nervous system, and my sense is she was stimulating your vagus nerve, because I know that these electrical units can be bought by anyone now. First of all, the parasympathetic nervous system has 3 branches. So it has social connection, it has that rest, digest, healing, repair, and then it has the shutdown mode. This is specifically called high tone dorsal of the parasympathetic and the vagus nerve. My sense, Lisa, is what occurred when you say you felt calm and present is it's possible that put you into a bit of a disconnection and dissociation. I could be wrong, but the dead giveaway is when you say, it felt slower for me, but then it was hard to get things accomplished. Now, it could be that maybe it put you into a baseline of more calm that was rest, digest. But if you had trouble moving and getting going, that's a very clear sign of there was some shutdown that got turned on. This is why I cannot advocate for these sorts of devices that are just stimulating one nerve, because that one nerve has different gears and it goes to different parts. And if we have a preponderance to have already dysregulation, the system, it's like if you think about a highway, if it's grooved in a certain way and the cars are always going down this one road, that road is going to get more grooved. It's going to be more used. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go down that road because that road has bush and shrubs and I can't drive down it. So you stimulate this parasympathetic nervous system. And if the system is familiar with shutdown and collapse or disconnection, it's like, we're going to go that route. So we're going to get this part stimulated more. That's my sense. So then you say, in the past, I've done neurofeedback and I found some treatments would leave me feeling anxious and overstimulated, and others would leave me feeling calm and tired and not able to think clearly or quickly. So this is again it. Again, neurofeedback can be very useful, but there's a lot of stimulation going on. It's the same with EMDR. That can be very useful with someone who already has a regulated nervous system and they have a shock trauma and they're stuck in a bit of a PTSD loop. Then EMDR can be wonderful. And this is kind of what it was designed for. It wasn't designed for working with more dysregulated nervous systems that are there as a result of, let's say, early and developmental trauma. It's just like if you had a baby that was jittery and not able to relax, the way to do connection, the way to help them isn't to plug them up to a machine and stimulate their parasympathetic nervous system. We need to connect. We need to hold. We need to find out, what do they need? Do they need food, shelter, safety? Are they too hot? Are they too cold? And so what's occurring, I think, in our world is, of course, we don't want to be living in dysregulation. So we're looking for these little biohacks and quick fixes. And we have to go back to the basics. Like, if we didn't get that good start of secure connection, secure attachment, unconditional love, we were allowed to be authentic, we learned how to self-regulate through the co-regulation of our primary caregiver, we are not going to have solid foundation on board. And so we need to start with that building of solid foundation, which is exactly what we teach in the 21 days. And then your final piece here, Lisa, this is a great question, by the way, because it feeds in all these elements of that anatomy lesson I gave you at the beginning, which is how this nervous system works. But then we have to go to another piece, which I just mentioned, which is, how do we get developed when we're young to have self-regulation of this nervous system? If we didn't get that, we have to go back to that. We don't go back in time, that's impossible. But as adults, we can't quick fix this. We have to go back to the basics. So then you say, when fluctuating between one or the other extreme, is there a state that is simply functional between the extremes of fight, flight, freeze, and rest, digest? Or could it be that my body isn't used to being balanced, and so it jumps from extreme to extreme? You nailed it on the head there, Lisa. What's happening is your system, my hunch is, you're seeking out these treatments because your system is probably in some form of dysregulation. There's nothing wrong with that. I was in that state too. My husband, who is here on the chat, he had complex PTSD and a ton of health problems and addiction issues when we met. Trouble even in social settings. And we've talked about this at length in interviews, he and I on my channel. But that has completely shifted for him. But as we go through this process of learning regulation, it again isn't this, it's good and then it's not good, or it's, it just doesn't just change. And so we might feel extremes as we're moving through this work, but we don't want to be pushing the system into extremes with the therapy, a therapeutic that pushes us more into those extremes. I hope that makes sense. We want to work through this dysregulation by building capacity, restoring safety, restoring connection. That's what we do by learning how to self-connect with yourself. I do lessons in 21 days, also SBSM, but also in 21 days where there's touch, where there's movement, where there's connecting with the environment, connecting with impulse. I haven't even mentioned our skeleton and muscles, how we work with that. So all in all, I mean, I think you're hearing what I'm saying here. I don't love these treatments because, I'll be honest, I've heard of some people, and actually we could post Jerica. Jerica and I she's a student. She started with 21 days. She went on to SBSM. She had a manual therapy done to stimulate and to work with the vagus nerve, and her system went bonkers. She got seizures. She was disoriented, really intense reaction. And she just needed to work slowly on building capacity in her system. So we'll post that up there. Her story is really incredible. And thank goodness, while she was having these strong reactions from this manual treatment that occurred, she was also looking up this work and the nervous system work. And then she saw, oh, wow, I think my system just overreacted to this. All right, next question. Let me have a little bit of liquid here. Okay. I'd love to know about how someone with a history of capital T trauma, so what that is meaning is we kind of put big T trauma into the boat of severe violence growing up, being attacked, raped, being not allowed to eat food, being isolated in our home, severe neglect. We would also put in here severe medical issues growing up, surgeries that happen multiple times. That can also be the case of big T. And then, of course, natural disasters, near drowning, choking, accidents, car accidents. So I just wanted to put that there. So someone with a history of this kind of trauma in childhood, how would they be? So someone with a history of capital T trauma in childhood would be aware of when the nervous system actually is in a state of real regulation in everyday life and not a state of suppressing or hiding old pain and living in fragmentation. So how would a person know? I see what you're saying. In other words, how do you know if you're really healed and built a flexible and healthy nervous system instead of just being happily unaware and completely repressed in survival stress? So this is a great question. So again, I want everybody to think of this as an ongoing timeline. As I said, we don't go from being in a state of dysregulation and then we're all of a sudden regulated. Things throw us off as we are on this path of healing. But if we go back to what I said at the beginning about how the peripheral nervous system connects to our movement, all of our organs, our connection with others, how we think, how we show up authentically, I like to think of it this way. If you had a bunch of pieces, objects, all lined up in a row, and you think of, like, say they're tennis balls, could be anything. And each tennis ball represents a part of your physiology, a part of your creativity, a part of your connection with others, a part of your spirituality, a part of your digestion, hormones, immune system, heart rate, temperature regulation. So all these functions. So you've got all these tennis balls lined up. We know when we've built a better and more flexible nervous system when all of these balls are moving forward slowly at the same time. And so what that means is that we're not just, this actually piggybacks beautifully with the question above about having, say, a therapeutic and we feel calm. So maybe that tennis ball, if I feel more calm and at peace, has zipped up really quickly. But then these other systems are like, wait, what about me? You forgot about me. You forgot about my digestion and all these things. And then that's where then the system kind of revolts and can go into a flare, can go into intense, we would call it symptoms, because we haven't moved all those balls forward slowly. And so this comes back to the theme of what does regulation look like, is we're moving all these things forward a little bit at a time. If we try to shift things too quickly by, say, just processing emotion, so this is what often occurs. So when we know we've had, let's say, a terrible physical attack, and we know we have to get that survival stress out, we have to feel our protection mechanisms come up. We might need to do that. Or we might need to build the foundation first in our system because it's been so rattled due to early trauma. We need to build up this foundation so that these big T traumas can come out when the system has more robustness, when the digestion is working a little bit better, when the ability to ask for help is a little more online, when we have more resources and support mechanisms in place. So all these things, when they're a bit more lined up and a bit more forward, we can then work with these big T's with a bit more security. Like there's just more of a foundation in the system. And so we also know that we have a more flexible nervous system when little things that used to trigger us don't really bother us, or maybe they used to trigger us and bother us for a week. And now it's like a day, or it used to be a day and it's now just an hour, and it used to be an hour. And now it's just, oh, that really irritated me. And then you get a little angry in a healthy way. Healthy aggression is so important. But then you feel this physiological response of, oh, I'm activated. And now I'm going to feel my ground and I'm going to sense my breath, and I'm not going to push away the discomfort. Goes back to this Post-it note. Can we be with discomfort easier? So when we can be with discomfort easier, that shows, to your question here, that we're getting more flexible. And then I also like to say, I don't think we're ever fully healed because constantly our body is breaking down and building back up. But I do like to say this. I like to say we're either healing or we're not healing, right? It's like we're either building a healthy relationship or we're not. We're either curious or we're not. We're either in survival or we're not. And then how the other systems kind of coalesce around that is going to be super individual. Some of us do have more genetic predispositions to certain things. My system has been more genetically predisposed due to my early trauma. It's not really genetic actually, but my early trauma had a lot to do with being in chemicals and being exposed to really not good things in utero and as a child. And so I have a hypersensitivity to chemicals, scents, smells, and that's my thing. Other people might have troubles with their gut. Other people might have troubles with how they think and how they compute in their brain. Other people might have more trouble with breath and breathing. You know, I mentioned asthma a little while ago. So I hope that answers that question, Selena. Great question. And I will say too that I have witnessed people who should have died a long time ago heal and thrive. One of my best colleagues, one of my biggest supporters within my courses, she has said, and I've had many people say, I would have died if it wasn't for this work. And these are people who, when I met them or when they came into this work, were bedridden. They couldn't leave the house. They were in wheelchairs. Now, of course, these are not stories that then shift overnight. This takes years and years of building up. It takes time for the system to recover, but the cool thing is that when you do it slowly, it sticks. It sticks. All right. Oh, here's a good one. Are you able to study a new career while doing this nervous system work? That's a great question. Yes. I also think that you might not be able to do the classic 5-load courses per semester, because I know when I was a kiddo, young 20-year-old, even back then, I was functionally frozen and very high achieving. I struggled with taking 5 courses a semester. That was way too much. So as you get more regulated and as you become more aware of your interoception and your body's needs, you're going to find that you can't push to the same way. But I will say, when you have more regulation in your nervous system, your brain is going to think clearer. Your cognition is going to be on better. You're going to have better memory. You're also going to become better at being creative in how you study. You're going to remember things. When we are stuck in a survival response, from many of us, it's in utero and even before, we're not registering information because we're, again, that proverbial burning of the house. Like we're tending to the burning of the house, right? To use that analogy. And so, I mean, I've often wondered, it'd be so fun, I think, to go back to university and be in that environment and learn and take in information. And I've always wondered, would it be easier? My sense, though, it might take a little longer, or it might not. You know, it might be that because your system is more efficient and more effective at processing information, you're taking care of yourself. It just might be a joy to do that rather than a chore. Because I know a lot of people, they go to school and it's just a stress. It's stressful. And so the other thing is, when you're more regulated, you're also going to focus on what you really want to work on. Okay. Let's see here. So this is a question from Emily. When I feel a strong feeling or sensation, which I feel for many hours a day, I drop everything and just give it my full attention. But this hinders my life. Yes, that will definitely hinder your life. I can no longer read books, hang out with people, or go on walks because the feelings are so strong and I feel like I have to be with them or journal or somehow focus on them. Otherwise, I panic. I panic and feel a loss of control if I can't focus on them to do all the years of work, more than full time, and suppressed, and then severe burnout. I've been bedridden for some years. Is this healthy? Is this healthy, the way forward? Or do you think I should force myself to do things even though my whole being is only wanting to focus on sensations, feelings, inner world, many, many hours a day. Do you think it's a control thing, ego, or do you think it's actually helping? It is frustrating. I want to free my attention to do normal things. Great question. So I could imagine that this is really frustrating, Emily. And what I will say is this, there's a model in the work that I've learned, and it forms how my course has been created. And I'll speak to your question. We need to focus, of course, on feelings and sensations. But at this level, I would say that this is not serving you. This is where I feel it'll be important for you to move out of the body, not disconnect, but you need to move your focus and attention into the environment, into behavior, into movement. And the reason why is we are not just sensation and we're not just feeling. And if, and I don't know your history, but I'm gonna make a hunch that there was some kind of early developmental trauma, maybe in utero trauma, maybe birth trauma, where your body went into strong sensation, and the feelings and the sensations and the fear, the threat was so high that for you, your system just it focused on that internal self. And for whatever reason, it disconnected from the outside. Some people, it goes the opposite way, right? Everything is so intense. I'm going to stop listening to my body and I'm going to be an overachiever and I'm going to look at everything on the outside. That's more me. So for you, and I do hope, if you haven't already, that you'll join 21 days so that you can have some guidance around how to direct your focus and attention in a healthy way outside of your body. This would be what we would call orienting. There's also some lessons where we work on something called potent posture, where you're sensing more your skeleton, your movement in space. Those, I think, will be very important for you to shift the focus out of the internal. But then what we do is you get, oh yeah, there's orienting, there's breath. Then you just dip a little bit into these strong sensations, but then you dip yourself out, or you take yourself out. This is very classic somatic experiencing, the work of Peter Levine, which I'm trained in at one of the highest levels. He developed a model called SBSM, and you don't need to get too wrapped up in this, but SBSM is an acronym, and he writes about this in his book, In an Unspoken Voice: sensation, image, behavior, affect, meaning. So you are really good at sensation and probably image, but there's a lack, if you will, of behavior, meaning. And so we need to move your system, again, this would be my suggestion, into more of behavior, meaning. So to go back to your question, should I just force myself? I would say you don't want to be mean to yourself and you don't want to be abusive to yourself, obviously. But for some people, we need to kind of shake them out of bed a little bit and like, can you do one thing today? Can you do the laundry? Can you sweep the floor? Can you get out for a 5-minute walk? Or can you just sit on the stoop and hear the birds, watch a funny show, right? So again, as you said, you can't read books or hang out with people or go on walks. You say sometimes. So the question is, what can you do a little bit of, right? What can you do a tiny bit of? And then do just a little bit and then rest and then come back to the system. I hope that was helpful. And I really do wish you luck. It's completely possible to get out of this loop. And it comes back to, this work, you guys, it isn't just about sitting with what we're feeling and being with it. That's kind of, we could say, the old news of somatic therapy. We need to connect it with the environment. And then back to that peripheral nervous system I was talking about. I mentioned it governs our movement, right? Our posture, how we feel our body, how we feel ourselves in space. We have to work with our movement as well. It's not enough to just work with our movement, and it's not enough to just be with our sensations. We have to connect them together. And that's really, one could say that is my superpower, is teaching people how to do that. All right, let me just have a little more water. I'll keep going. I'm going to go probably up until the top of the hour and get the questions, as many questions answered as I can. So Nusin asks, I've been working with a very good somatic practitioner for the last 2.5 years. I want to do SmartBody SmartMind. So that, again, is my 12-week curriculum. We'll run that again mid-September of this year. And then you say all The free work, so all my open resources from Irene, is so intense for my system. I've been trying to orient for 2 years now, and every time I look at my hands for 2 seconds or feel my feet for 2 seconds, I get a weak, extreme anxiety and gut reaction. And this is my reaction towards all my free resources. I'm trying to titrate as much as possible, but is it possible that SBSM or 21 days is too much? I have 9 out of 10 ACEs. So this is Adverse Childhood Experiences Study Score. So you've lived through and survived a lot of trauma and adversity. So thanks for sharing that. And I've lived in different foster homes since I was day one. So maybe I have to accept that this is not for me yet. So this is a complex question, Nusin, and I'm glad you've asked it. First of all, I want to say that you're here asking this question and you're engaging with your interest and desire to get better. So I want to first put that as a very important piece. Many people that have this high level of adversity and trauma aren't curious enough to even ask a question. So I'm being very serious there. So that's a really good starting point. And I would even say, how can you take in what I just said into your system internally? And really, I just, again, really want to say how important it is that you're showing up and asking this question. Because you mentioned that you were in foster care from very young, what we know is that your sense of safety and secure attachment didn't really occur. And when it did occur, there was no doubt, due to your ACE score, abuse, which sucks. But again, this ability to know, wow, I'm still here, I've survived that, is important. It makes sense to me that when you orient and feel your feet, it feels extreme. And so this comes back to, how can you, it might sound crazy, with only 2 seconds, how can you do even less? It might be that you don't start with orienting and you don't start with feeling the feet, but you're starting more with the resources in the environment. So in SmartBody SmartMind, we start out with what is a resource. And so I'll say this really quickly. It's something on the external of us. It could be nature. It could be an image of like something, colors. It can be people. It can be music. It could be a pet. It could be your favorite blanket. It could be a warm cup of tea or a hot bowl of soup. Again, it doesn't matter what it is, but connecting to something external. So you're putting your focus external and then you're sensing just what that is like. Without trying to orient or feel your body, you just let a little bit of that trickle in. And then you take a break. Now, to answer your question, is this going to be too much for me? I wish I could answer that. It might be, but it might not be. It all comes down to how you engage with the material and titrate. Titrate, titrate, titrate. The other thing I will say, titrate, just to explain to everybody that doesn't know what that is, it's little bits of work, like tiny, tiny bit, but it does sound like you're already doing this. Now, if you have a somatic practitioner, for you, it is going to be essential that you work with someone that does the work of Kathy Kane or Stephen Terrell, which is touch work or transforming touch work. You may or may not find that person in person. If you can, that's often recommended. And this work is, again, what I've studied and practiced. It's in the SmartBody SmartMind curriculum, and it's where we work with what's called the kidney adrenals, the gut, the brainstem, the diaphragms of the body, where we're not trying to force orientation and we're not trying to feel directly. We're just letting ourselves or allowing ourselves to feel the security of another human there in our world. Now, I chose my words carefully there. I didn't say another human who is safe, because when we've had this level of ACE score, no human is safe. I'm just going to say it right out loud. The world is not safe. The world is a dangerous place, and you have to protect yourself. But the key is, how can you work with someone and feel maybe the threat response, name it, notice it, and move with it, and continue to find your resources. So this is complex. I won't lie. And I want to go back to you sensing, or you being here and asking this question. You have a somatic practitioner. If you could work in conjunction with that somatic practitioner and my offerings, I would do that. If you were to start 21 days, I would say take it super slow. Focus on the theory maybe at the beginning. That's another way to titrate this into the body. Start with a theory. If you're here and able to listen to this and be interested, that is gold, right? So how can you take that interest and that curiosity and just do little bits with your system? And then I would recommend, out of the two curriculums, SBSM will be more robust for you because it does have guidance into working with the kidney, adrenals, the diaphragms, the joints. That being said, when you do join 21 days, and I'll give everybody this knowledge, the cost of 21 days is taken off of your SmartBody SmartMind tuition. So right now there's a sale on $147 for the 21 days. When we do SBSM in the fall, you will still be given that $300 off of the SBSM tuition. So it's kind of an interesting investment. So that's something to bear in mind. And then don't forget, we have really professional folk in the 21-day forum answering your questions, people who are experienced with working with early developmental trauma and needing to titrate. And then at the end of the day, Nusine, you have to make the decision. It's got to feel right for you. There shouldn't be feeling like you're being pressured to do this. And as I've noted, I have worked with folks online in this format with these curriculums with ACE scores just as high as yours, with intense sensitivity to orienting and internal sensation. And it comes back down to you wanting to do this work and really listening to what your body can and cannot handle. All right, next question. I have a question. So this is from Hella. I have a question regarding, in quotes, tackling anxiety and when working with the nervous system. How does it relate and how do I go about it? Are there any hacks? So no hacks. I wish there were, but there aren't. So I'm very clear with that. To tackle anxiety and to work with it, we have to understand what anxiety is. I've done many videos on anxiety and what it is. In simple form, it is stored survival stress. It is the system feeling that there is a threat. It can also be the system coming out of a lifelong being in freeze, functional freeze, collapse, and or shutdown. So this is what I talked about at the top of the hour, where I said we have these survival responses: fight, flight, freeze, collapse, shutdown. And so when we're working with ourselves, some people tend to live more in fight flight area. Some people are kind of fight flight freezy. Some people aren't in fight flight, they're in functional freeze. Again, that was how I was. And then some people are through that spectrum and they're just living in collapse. So for some of us, the anxiety we feel came out or started when we were usually infants. And one of the ways that occurs is, I'll just use one example. I'm not saying this is you. Common back in the day, and sadly still now, to let babies cry themselves to sleep, to not pick them up when they're under distress, or to not listen to them, not attach to them, not give them unconditional connection and support. That puts a little human into survival physiology. That's the fight flight. For some humans, they kind of stay ramped up in that anxiety. And it isn't a brain thing. It's not a cognition thing. It's a sense that there is danger or nobody is there to connect with me. And it's like this, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. It's like this distress, right? And then we think that there's something wrong with us because our behavior is showing this. And really it is a state of just being unsafe in the system, looking for threat and danger. So there are no hacks. The way to quote unquote hack this is what I've been mentioning. It is this ability to build foundation, really, excuse me, understand what survival physiology is, understand a little bit about your story, like why would this anxiety be there, for example, and then working at building up foundations rather than tackling the anxiety. We're building foundation through the practices that I teach. And often what happens is more insight and meaning comes into you and into the person around why this quote unquote anxiety is there. You say then, I've been doing some EMDR, working on PTSD from childhood. So it sounds like there is a history of early trauma. And along the process, I think my nervous system was overwhelmed. Yes. I now experience good and bad days. I don't have a big supportive network, so I struggle to self-soothe while also living and job hunting. Yeah, so again, I mentioned this earlier, EMDR, I hate to say it, and even Bessel van der Kolk talks about this in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. It was not designed for working with chronic PTSD and early trauma. It is for specific, in my opinion, and what I've seen professionally, shock trauma when the system already has baseline regulation because it is stimulating. And so what I've heard from people who have had histories of early trauma, who have done EMDR, and then, as you've said, gotten overwhelmed, they said it forces a person to override what they're feeling internally. And so if you're overriding, even unconsciously, what's happening inside, you're piling more survival stress into the system. The system is going to lock down even more, and you're going to store more of that survival stress, i.e. fight, flight, i.e. anxiety. And so it is so important, again, to go back to, my soapbox, build a foundation, lay down solid connection to self and the environment. Because as you said here, PTSD from childhood, chances are that good connection and that unconditional support and secure attachment may not have been there, or perhaps there was a surgical trauma or something at birth or in utero. Even though we can still have loving parents and everything can be there. Food, Maslow's hierarchy of needs are all there. But if something occurs when we're young that throws our system off, it can be enough to keep our system stored in this survival stress. Okay. Let's see here. Thank you, Seth, for answering questions. Okay, from Karen. I think this might be one of the... Okay, I'm going to get to 3 more, and then we'll call it quits for today, you guys. Thanks for being here. So Karen asks, I've been in a deep dorsal vagus chronic freeze, so good, the lingo, freeze of my neck muscles since being diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago. No one could diagnose it. Feels as if I'm being strangled by my neck muscles. That must not be nice. So just to give some context, the dorsal vagus deep freeze, that's where the system is in a shutdown collapse. And so an area of the body or the whole body can go into this armoring and protection of an area. In this case, it's your neck muscles. This is not acute, but chronic. Now I understand this is my nervous system not feeling safe. It has affected my eating too, which makes sense because of obviously your esophagus, your food tube goes through there. I find every video on how to temporarily calm myself, but nothing touches the deep stored trauma. Yeah. Can your courses help me? So I will say yes, definitely. The 21 days is a great way to be guided into, of course, what the nervous system physiology is. While today I did a quick overview of it, that course, 21 days and SBSM, goes deeper into the biology of stress, how things get trapped. But it also gets into the practices, gentle orienting. So when we orient and we look around, we move our head, our eyes, our ears, but also our neck and our body a little bit. And so being guided through that process in the way I do might offer and provide a nice titrated way to be directed into that practice. There's also elements of the course, of course, that focus on containment, connection. So I'm not trying to get anybody to settle, so to speak, or relax or to get calm. We're working at the underlying physiology to move ourselves into more safety. Now, the other thing that is, and I haven't even mentioned this, that is absolutely unique to my online courses is I'm also trained in something called the Feldenkrais method. And so within 21 days, and of course, my other larger course, SBSM, there are lessons devoted to working with the spine, working with the head and the pelvis, which of course brings the neck, the cervical spine along for the ride. And so my hunch here, Karen, is that the Feldenkrais lessons might be a lovely way to experience movement, guided movement in a way that isn't forced and that can help take off some of that armoring and freeze around your neck muscles. Now, the other thing I'm going to suggest, and this is not in my scope, but it's something I use a lot, and it all depends on who you have access to, is finding someone who does really good osteopathic work. The traditional osteopathic work that's more evolved from France, where it's gentle, but it's also working with the bone, the fascia, the fluids, and really helping open up and make sure that everything below and above this area of your cervical spine has openness. And then again, this comes back into working with the diaphragms. That is what osteopaths work with. It's one of the things they work with. They also work with the energetics, the electromagnetic elements of the body. I would also say for you, really important to get your feet on the ground and to work with fluids. So by that, I mean, again, it depends on your system, but working with the lymph, because we have tons of lymph nodes in our neck. And if they're stuck, they won't drain, and then we'll get a lot of congestion in this area. So again, I've just given you a lot to work on, but I like to say, yeah, definitely my courses will help. And you also want to make sure that you've got support working with the tissues, the diaphragms, and making sure that everything above and below is draining properly. All right, final question. And this one is simple and yet very important. So I'm curious to know if you incorporate mindfulness into your programs. So by default, interestingly enough, this is coming from Geraldine, it's naturally incorporated into the work through the way I'm guiding you to connect with self and the environment. And a really interesting thing happens when we become more regulated and we have more foundation and we're not governed by that proverbial fire that is on inside of our system. So we're not constantly alerted to threat and stress, whether it's real or perceived. When we're in good flow with our internal environment, that interoception, we're in good flow with the outside environment. This doesn't mean we have to be perfect. We can still be working on our traumas. But when we have this connection of self with environment together, the system drops into a state of mindfulness and connection that is quite introspective. And many of my senior students will say, interestingly enough, that they have stopped meditating because they're just doing it naturally. Our biologies want us to be in that connection state. We could call it flow. And when we're not trapped in that survival energy, our thinking isn't looking for danger. It's not awfulizing the past, worrying about the future. And it's just, excuse me, present in the moment. So I don't incorporate mindfulness per se, and yet everything we do is mindfulness based. I hope that makes sense. All right, I've talked for a while. My throat is dry now. I'm going to call it quits for today. Thank you all for being here. I hope this has been useful. Excuse me. I hope that this has answered some of your questions, or maybe more than what you came here to learn. Again, I've been doing this work for a very long time. I was the first person to put online trauma healing, somatic work out on the internet. We're still doing it because we've seen it works. And I've also mentioned in this Q&A talk with some of the questions, sometimes you need extra supplemental support. I'm not shy to say, yeah, it might be good to have a practitioner, it might be good to have an osteopath, it might be good to have a physical therapist, it might be good to have a support group, a therapist, a coach. But I know a lot of these people, osteopaths, physical therapists, massage therapists, yoga instructors, meditative coaches, meditation teachers, coaches, and many of them still come to this work and they go, wow, my clients are so scared and dysregulated, and I can't do the physical work with them because their system is constantly under threat and danger. And so it's so important that we get this foundation on board, and then the other work that you might need to do, it sticks better. It sticks better. So again, a reminder, we have a sale going on right now, $150 off the regular price of my 21-day nervous system tune-up, which is a steal right now. I will admit we've never done a sale of this magnitude, but I also know that times are tough for many of us, and so I wanted to offer this to all of you. Now, of course, if for whatever reason this isn't the right time to begin, I totally get it. That is fine. I'm not going anywhere. At least I don't think so. So I'll be here doing this stuff well into the year and into the future. So I would love it if you are feeling the impulse and the urge, get in, join, save some money, get working, use our resources within the 21 days, ask questions. Thanks again to Seth for being in here and answering more questions than I could get to. And thanks to my staff and my team for helping facilitate all of this. We will talk to you later. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.